All right. Welcome, everyone. This is a short presentation that I'm calling 25 plus language learning tips. I kept adding to this even this week. This is just sort of a collection that I've put together over the years. So it's a little bit more random and a little bit less academic than a lot of presentations that I provide. But I hope it'll be fun nonetheless and maybe a little bit useful. So let's go. All right. First tip is when studying vocabulary, don't just look at the word, say it, hear it, write it, and listen to it. The more senses you involve in your learning, the more likely you are to retain the what you learn. So if you're learning the word for apple, whether it's manzana in Spanish or lingo in Japanese or pinguo in Chinese, right? You look at it, you say it, you think about it, hear what you're saying, okay? Make whatever associations, take a bite of that apple, okay? Whatever association that you can make using as many senses as possible, the more likely you are to retain it, of course. And that's to say nothing that some of us are more visual, some of us are more audio, and so on and so forth, okay? Some more tactile. Tip number 2, keep a pocket-sized notebook with you at all times to jot down new words and expressions. This is something that I did in Spain, that I did in Japan, when I would be out with friends. Sometimes you would have just funny discussions. How many words can you tell me in your language for bathroom? How many words can you tell me for, you know, this, that, or the other? You'll often learn a lot of slang, and you just keep writing these things down, okay? But don't just write them down. Study your notebook whenever you have a few free minutes, waiting for a ride, waiting for a class, waiting in a doctor's office, or waiting in line are but a few places. So you're in line at the supermarket, you know, it can be annoying. Just pull out your little book, start reading a few things. The more you do, the better, okay? Next. Studying for short periods of time is often better than spending long periods. The important thing is studying frequently. Try studying 5 minutes of your target language in between studying other subjects. It's like conditioning for a sport. You need to build up your endurance for conversing in a language. So if you want to run a marathon, don't try running 26 miles if you haven't done it before, right? You want to start with a mile, a couple of miles, and so on and so forth. The same with learning a language. You will get tired very easily. And just like running a marathon, if you haven't done it in a while, you'll find you tire easily. So for example, nowadays I seldom speak Spanish or Japanese for more than a half hour, an hour at a time. So if I go to Peru or to Spain, I need to build up a little bit of endurance, and it gets better by the second or third day. But I can tell you it can be very tiring until you have that endurance built up. Try to think in the target language. As you find yourself or imagine yourself in various situations, ask yourself, how would I say this, right? I think I learned a lot of language just cutting the lawn and thinking and imagining myself in different situations. How would I ask for this at a restaurant? How would I ask for something at a train station? Then what, right? And close to this, try writing a journal. Once you have a little bit of the language under your belt and you're able to express yourself on paper, try writing a journal. By trying to express something, you will naturally run into difficulties and thereby challenge yourself. If you can't look up your answers, try your teacher or a native speaker. And oftentimes, even though you have something that's grammatically correct, that's perfectly understandable, it might be unusual for the people of that particular language, okay? So it's always good to have a native speaker confirm or reject what you think was a correct or good sentence. Next. Learn to say, what is this or this thing? You can use it in so many instances, especially when you point. For example, when you go to China, if you just know how to say jega, means this thing, right? You can go to the cafeteria and you can point and say jega, right? Jega iga, this one, right? And you can get through quite a bit with just what is this? In Spanish, ¿qué es esto, right? What is this? Especially if you're with small children, you can say, what is this? What is this? And they will tell you, and you can learn some words and repeat it. Was ist das in German? これは何ですか in Japanese. So learn that phrase right away, because then you can amplify your vocabulary, especially the nouns in your target language. Next, when reading, don't agonize over every word or expression. Let yourself continue reading as though it were your native language. Then go back and read the passage again if necessary. The important thing is not to get discouraged. Even if you don't understand everything, you are exposing yourself to vocabulary, syntax, style, thought processes, etc. So a lot of things will seep in just by forcing yourself to go over the words and the sentences and everything else, okay? Things happen on a subconscious level that you may not always realize, okay? That said, passively expose yourself to radio, TV, and music in the target language, right? Just listen to some of the words, just have the TV going on if you're in that particular country, or if you have a foreign language in your house. You probably will understand very little, but you'll start to pick up, oh, I hear this phrase a lot in Japanese. Why do they keep saying naruhodo, naruhodo, right? And then I have to, why did I hear this word, right? You pick things up oftentimes without realizing it. And you also pick up pronunciation and rhythm and all kinds of things. So you see Gloria Stefan at the top says the rhythm is going to get you. It really does, because for example, in Spanish, the rhythm is so much different than it is in English. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And these are just a few things that I listen to while learning Spanish. Realize that your brain is predisposed or wired to learn language, and that the more you learn, the more accelerated your learning will become. So the more you learn, the more of a base you have, the more you have to build on, the more connections that you make in your brain, the more connections you can make, okay? So it is really, it's an accelerated learning process. You just have to keep going, right? You just can't give up. And you can see the language learning curve on the left, right? It can be very slow, especially in something like Chinese, where we have no cognates or things to draw on. But as you build up that base, you have more and more to build up on, and your learning will accelerate, okay? You just have to keep going. Next, understand that language is much more than just words. Use and rely on pointing, hand gestures, facial expressions, and tone of voice. This concept is known as pragmatics, okay? So don't feel that you're just limited to articulating something perfectly. You can point, you can do whatever needs to be done, making your facial expressions. People understand what's happening. If you speak Japanese, you'll notice a lot of the communication is with eyes, right? Much more so than what people are saying. You really have to understand what they're feeling and so on. Okay, when listening, try to grasp as much meaning as you can. Don't freak out if you don't understand something. Oftentimes a speaker will repeat him or herself for emphasis. And this is especially true in Spanish, okay? I noticed, I spoke with a friend of mine who's Puerto Rican and did a lot of cross-cultural education training. And I said, you know, I noticed that if I don't understand somebody's story the first time, they'll repeat it. And oftentimes they'll repeat it again. And she said, well, this is fairly common in Spanish, because if you just say something once, like this is a good restaurant, people don't really take you seriously. But if you go on and say, this is a really great restaurant, I mean, this is the best restaurant I've ever tried, then people begin to take you more seriously. So it's sort of common within the Spanish language to do a lot of repeating and emphasizing and so on and so forth. So one of the things is just don't worry about understanding every single word. Just kind of listen, get 60% of what's going on, and you're probably in good shape. Okay. Next, practice important structures by using formulas. I think it's interesting to me that languages can be reduced to formulas. So things like in Spanish, like tengo que plus infinitive, right? Tengo que cortar el césped. I have to cut the lawn. Tengo que leer este libro. I have to read this book. You just tengo que plus the infinitive, and you get used to it, right? And you can rattle that off very quickly. Likewise in Chinese, right? 你可以, you may, plus whatever the verb is, right? 我喜欢, I like something, plus the verb. 我喜欢游泳, I like swimming, right? And so on and so forth. So you learn these patterns and you repeat them to yourself, and they should come out of you just as quickly as vocabulary. Another thing, some people are a bit too ambitious when it comes to saying things. They have something formulated in their native tongue and they can't figure out how to boil it down. So when you express something, for example, do it simply. For example, if you really want to say, it would behoove you to partake in a more serious engagement of your academic pursuits, just settle for estudia más, or study more, right? Just reduce it, figure out what you have to say and make it simple. On the left is a cartoon that I drew when I was a freshman in college during my trip to Italy. I had a classmate who seemed to think he was Shakespeare, and he thought it was really cool to speak in the most complicated way you could think of. So this is sort of a satire where I had him speaking. This is almost exactly what happened. He said, I was contemplating whether or not it might be possible for me to indulge in purchasing a portion of nutrient within a more center proximity as opposed to the outer lying region, right? And the Italian vendor says, you want to center the piece of the pizza? He goes, right, okay. So just say, I want the center piece of the pizza, right? You don't have to make it convoluted. Likewise, when you want to say something and you don't have the words for it, what's the simplest way doing it? Language majors are great at Pictionary. We know how to reduce a complicated thought into something simple because it's something that we have to do all the time in our pursuit to learn a language. Use your target language with your friends as a secret code language, okay? Ask if they think the price is too high, right? Right in front of the salesperson. Or if you think somebody is attractive, right? It's always fun to have a secret code language. And if you're a parent, discuss your child's punishment options in another language so that you can present a united front when you're finished. So my wife and I would often discuss in Japanese whether we would ground our son for a week or 2 weeks. And when he heard Japanese, he knew that he was in trouble. And so I think that's why he's been living in China for 8 years. But it's great to have a nice secret language when you want to, and it's fun. You have more privacy at restaurants and so on. If you have a chance to practice your target language with the native speaker, just do it. And kids can be really a helpful resource. I learned so much from little kids, just hanging out with kids. What is this? What is that? And you can play all sorts of fun little games with your limited language. So take every opportunity you have to practice with the native speaker. This you may have seen in The Color Purple, the movie. Label as many of your belongings as possible in the target language. That way, every time you see it, it will hopefully imprint something in your mind. For example, I remember the word for stapler is la grapadora because I had a stapler on my desk and I wrote in Spanish, la grapadora. So I will never forget that, right? Now, do you say staples? Las grapas, right? And I still have a picture of that label that I put on my stapler on my desk. Okay. Mnemonic devices, right? How do we make associations so that we remember something? So for example, in Chinese, if you say that you're hungry, you would say, wo le, right? How do I remember? So wo means I, and le is sort of an ending, but is the word for hunger. So the way I remember it is like E for empty, right? So wo le, okay? So I picture an E on my chest, I'm on empty, I'm hungry, wo le. There's one mnemonic, right? And we'll quiz you on this. Next, another mnemonic. When you're full, you say, wo bao le. So I picture I have to bow. I'm so full that I just have to bend over, right? So wo bao le, I'm full, right? Other mnemonics, and I have express permission from these people. The word ben or bun in Chinese means stupid. So I think of my good friend Benjamin Moyers when I think to say, and Ben, he's stupid. Or I had a student named Han. So I think Han means goofy. So I make some sort of association, right? The mnemonics you don't have to share like I'm doing, and I'll get in trouble for it, I'm sure. But anything that will help you to remember is great for learning a language. Quick quiz. How do we say I am hungry? Well, right. So, and how do I say I'm full? Paola, right? Bao. Okay, so these can be really helpful. Another mnemonic. In Japanese, when you say that you're getting married, the word is kekon shimasu. How do I remember to get married? Because everyone has kekon their wedding day, right? So there's your association, right? A mnemonic device. So again, how do I say I'm hungry? I'm hungry is hola, right? And I'm full, paola, right? And getting married is kekon, because you have kick on your wedding day, right? My good friend Larry Herzberg has a couple of books that he wrote. They're really inexpensive and available on Amazon for mnemonic devices in Japanese and Chinese. Herzberg, H-E-R-Z-B-E-R-G. Okay, next, patterns, right? Look for patterns so that you can learn multiple words with little effort. In Chinese, for example, the word hao means good, right? So I can say hao kan, good looking, right? Hao chur, good eating, delicious, right? Hao he, good drinking something. Hao ting, good listening, right? Sounds good. And then you look for the word nan, which means difficult. So nan kan, hard to look at or ugly, right? Nan ting, hard to listen to, so on and so forth. So you see these parallels and the patterns, and when you see the patterns, you can learn much more quickly. These are just some examples in English. The word bi meaning two, right? Bicycle, bifurcate, biweekly, biannual, logi, astrology, physiology, theology. When you get into Spanish and other Romance languages, you get logia, astrología, fisiología, teología, and then you understand, you can learn 20, 30, 40, 50 words at once you understand these patterns, right? Any T-I-O-N word in English is C-I-O-N in Spanish. Action, acción. Reaction, reacción, okay, so on and so forth. 1,000 words. I've just taught you 1,000 words in Spanish, okay? Don't get into the bad habit of relying on translation. There won't be time for that in a fluid conversation. So don't think, what did he say? Translate, what did he say? There's no time. You need to get into the mode of hearing large chunks of meaning at a time, right? Don't just translate and freak out about that all the time. Translation is often a detriment for learning language, okay? Try to get immersed as much as you can. When you see an apple, you think manzana. You don't think apple is manzana. You just look at it and that's what it is, right? Chunks of meaning, I've sort of alluded to this a few times. Try to memorize chunks of meaning rather than single words. So if I want to say it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I would say son las 2 de la tarde. I just say it all together. I don't even have to think son las 2, and then how do I say in the morning, how do I say in the afternoon? It just comes right out, right? So learn chunks of meaning, things together in groups that you'll use in a sentence. Also, repeat things to yourself, especially when you are alone, washing dishes, cleaning house, driving, cutting the lawn. Like I said, I learned a lot of language just cutting the lawn and thinking, how would I say this? How would I say that, right? Saying it again, using those formulas. Memorize dramatic lines from movies, the things, right? So if you're learning English, you can learn, you had me at hello, right? Show me the money, could have been a cantando, right? Or in Spanish, la vida es sueño y los sueños sueños son, right? So learn some of these things and you will learn sentences and phrases and so on and so forth. In Spanish, one of the things that I really enjoyed, and maybe this is not politically correct all the time, but they're called piropos. And piropos are a way of often complimenting generally a woman about her beauty and so on. And they were just so over the top and so funny that I learned some of them. And I thought I would share just a couple of them because they sort of helped me along just memorizing phrases such as, con esos ojos mirándome, ya no me hace falta la luz del sol. With these eyes looking at me, I no longer lack the light of the sun, right? Déjame mirarte bien antes de que la luz de tus ojos me derrita. Let me look at you until your eyes melt me, okay? What else? Cualquier día de estos me como su sonrisa y dejo el mundo sin luz. One of these days, I will eat your smile and leave the world without light, okay? Just over the top, crazy stuff. But I thought it was a fun way to learn Spanish, and my Spanish friends thought it was pretty funny too, especially with the foreigner learning it. Oftentimes, and if you have an international friend, sometimes you'll see that they get bored or their eyes sort of wane or they don't know what's going on. And sometimes people are clueless, but you might be talking about Saturday Night Live or football or the Jonas Brothers or Billie Eilish or something. And maybe your friend from whatever country knows very little about these things, right? So it's important for you as a host to steer the conversation towards something that they can talk about as well. Or if you're in another country and they're talking about children's shows from the 1990s and you have no concept about children's shows in Peru from the 1990s, either ask about it or change the subject to something that you will understand, okay? And understand, for example, that even the Americans and the Brits don't understand each other. These three Brits will have no idea about baseball and football. And likewise, these New York Giants fans probably know nothing about cricket or rugby. They speak the same language, but unless they have a similar frame of reference, they won't understand each other. When in Rome or Madrid, get excited about what they're excited about, okay? For example, you wouldn't believe how excited Spanish people get about chorizo and the sausage that they make in their particular pueblo. Ask them about their chorizo. If you want to make friends, tell them it's the best chorizo you've ever had in your entire life. You've tried 20 different chorizos, and this is the best, right? And people get excited about that. Manchego cheese, different kinds of wine. Learn about the politics of that country. Learn about the architecture. People get excited about the architecture of cathedrals and so on, and you might not have really thought about it. The literature, learn something about the literature of the country. The soccer, maybe you don't know much about soccer, but learn about it, right? So the more you learn, the more you'll have to talk about with the people in your host country. Be curious. There's a Viking commercial, right? There was a Thorstein Hagen, right? It says, be curious, okay? Be curious about the world. Ask questions. If you're not talking, if you're not listening, you're not learning. You need to be curious, find things out. The next set is train your brain, whether it's phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, peculiarities, okay? You need to get your brain used to these things. For example, Spanish vowels, you need to really enunciate. In English, we hardly open our mouths, but in Spanish, you need to say ah, e, I, o, u. They're shorter. Your mouth is wide when you say e, I, right? It's shorter when you say o. Okay, so it's not no, it's no, right? So you need to practice that again and again. And the rhythm of Spanish is not like English. In English, say the other day, I saw my friend, we went out, so on. But in Spanish, it's dot, 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 dot. And you need to practice that in Spanish when you say, vamos a la playa a las dos, vamos a la playa a las dos. So it's staccato. You need to train your brain to do that sort of thing. If you're studying Chinese, you need to, for example, begin your sentences with adverbial phrases like today, tomorrow, yesterday, at 3 o'clock, because that's the way it works in Chinese. And you have to get used to doing that, because without that, the lack of tenses in Chinese makes it very difficult to understand when something happened. So that's one of the things that I highly recommend in Chinese. Get all those phrases down because you need to begin with those. In Spanish, I love this. Get used to deflecting blame. In Spanish, you would never say, I lost the keys. It wasn't your fault. You'd say, se me perdieron las llaves. The keys got lost on me. I was there, but the keys got lost. Se me fue. I didn't forget. Left me. Se me rompió el plato. I didn't break the plate. You don't say rompí el plato. The plate was broken, right? You don't say, I forgot your address. You say, your address was forgotten, okay, on me. Se me olvidó tu dirección, okay? Train your brain when you're learning the subjunctive in Spanish. You learn to say, I hope that plus a subjunctive. So espero que vengas. If I said espero que vienes, that hurts my brain because I'm so used to using that subjunctive. Just practice it. Say it again and again. Learn the way people express themselves. In English, we're taught that topic sentence support your topic sentence. In Romance languages, it goes off quite a bit. I'll give you a quick example. When I was in Spain, I wrote an essay. I thought it was great. I had I use a keyhole method. I use the, every sentence was perfectly supported. And my professor gave me a C. I couldn't understand what happened. I was devastated. And my roommate, who had grown up bilingual, Spanish mother, Mexican father, read it and he said, this makes perfect sense to my English brain, but in Spanish, I want more. I need more. That is to say, explain, explain. So I did that on the next one. I was almost satirical about explaining, and I got an A. That's because that's what the Spanish professor is looking for, more and more explanation than I would normally give in English. East Asian is not so linear. There's a lot of information in there and it sort of comes together, but it doesn't really follow the same pattern that we're used to in Anglo-Saxon languages. When reading, it's better to read something twice quickly than once slowly. When you're reading, don't freak out at the beginning of a novel because oftentimes the author uses the best language they can think of. They're spending a long time in the beginning. You'll get used to the rhythm, to the way they speak. Don't just put the book down, okay? Get past the first page, the first chapter. It'll get easier. You'll understand the characters and what the author's getting at. When you learn a new expression, run out and use it as much as you can. Learn to say, how old are you? Ask everybody, how old are you? How old are you, right? And then it gets cemented in your brain if you ask it enough. And this is not to be discouraging, but some people feel like they should speak the language perfectly. And if you don't, it's okay, okay? Just do it as well as you can, right? Nobody just learns a language overnight, okay? Everybody has to walk the walk and talk the talk. Maybe if this is encouraging, remember that small children in Mexico, Spain, Guatemala, El Salvador, they can speak Spanish. You can too, right? Give yourself that much credit. Feel good about your accomplishments. If you have successfully navigated your way through a subway, checked into a hotel, negotiated a price using the target language, pat yourself on the back, okay? You have to feel good about what you've done. Study out loud with a partner, ask questions, ask silly questions with your conversation partner. When you're tutoring, that's really, language should be fun. It's for communication. Don't worry, we're coming to the end. Go on quests, right? If you're in another country, figure out how to buy a train ticket, a bus ticket. That's often very challenging. You don't think about that, right? Buying stamps at a post office can be a very anxiety provoking experience. Using any kind of public transportation, ordering things at restaurants, all these things we take for granted in our native language. Go out, force yourself to do these things. Play soccer, play basketball with locals. You'll learn a lot of words that way, a lot of vocabulary. And this one I have to say is, it might be helpful to study another language because as you study another language, it creates certain neural pathways in your brain. So I have this picture of a baseball bat with a donut. You know, when you're swinging a baseball bat with a donut and it's kind of heavy and then you take the donut off and you're like, oh my gosh, this is easier. I could hit this thing out of the park, right? When I practice Chinese, it's like that donut. It's like that extra weight, okay? And then I take the donut off. Oh, that's Spanish, so much easier, right? And I swear that there are extra neural pathways that are in my brain that make Spanish easier because I've studied Chinese, even though Chinese is not related to Spanish. Okay. Find a conversation partner, okay, who wants to learn your language, or better yet, somebody who doesn't, somebody who'll just speak the target language all the time. That's great. I have a friend who went to a Beijing cooking school because they didn't want to learn English and he knew he would only learn Chinese there. And toward the end, teach or tutor, because as you teach, you learn more. In Spanish, they say, enseñar es aprender dos veces. Teaching is learning twice, but I say it's 4 times. Prepare, you present, you appraise, and you provide extra help. So each time you go over something, you learn something that much better. Finally, have fun. Learning language should be fun. It should be for communicating. It should be for getting to know people, and just enjoy it. Okay, I think we're a little over time, but thank you for your attention. I will be happy to take any questions if there are any. Any questions, or do I have a You'd have to unmute if you, or you can put something in the chat.
Someone's wondering if this recording will be available anywhere.
I'm not hearing you, Gabrielle. Is there
Oh.
somebody who's asking something? I can't hear anything.
Hey, John, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I could hear Gabby fine.
Yes, I will repost a recording. It will be on the Learn a Chinese Phrase website. So if you look for Learn a Chinese Phrase at Wayne State University, I will have this posted as soon as I've had it rendered. Oh, wait. I think I know what it is. Hello? Any other questions maybe in the chat box?
Well, I have one, John. Can you hear me now?
All right. If not, I'll have this posted. Thank you for your attention. And I will sign off. I'll if you have any questions, I'll check the chat box for another minute or two. But you can stop recording, Gabrielle.